And so the moment did come where I said, where can I use my time best? But at the time I felt like it was, how do I find my purpose? But in reality, it was just a realignment of using my time well to serve others best.
One of the favorite lines that you have that I've heard you use is this term called everyday entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And with all the businesses in the world, all the big corporate entities, I know you're all about corporate entities, right? They get all the focus because they have all the, thousands of jobs coming to so-and-so and thousands of jobs coming to so-and-so. But when you do the math, you realize that the early entrepreneur, right, is the one that actually provides most of the jobs.
Yes.
How did you find that you were directly called to serve that particular entrepreneur?
Well, one of the things that happened when I was younger was my dad was a cab driver in Washington, D.C. So we spent most of our life kind of in intense poverty, but driving around the streets of D.C. And I was sitting in those passenger seat. My dad would say things like, what's great about America is you have two choices. You can, decide to clean a building or you can have your name on one. But either way, the options are open to you. And that's kind of stuck with me all my life, that I really am in the land of opportunity. And there's nothing more evident than when you're driving through the streets. I tell my kids all the time, every single business you see, whether it is a large business like a major bank out here or a small business like your local dry cleaners, they all started as everyday entrepreneurs. Every single one of them, even Walmart, with the Waltons on Main Street. So it's one of those things where it lets you know that there's endless opportunity, but it also lets you know that, everyday people can make a really big impact.
Well, so you and I both love the everyday entrepreneur, right? We are those people. We grew our organizations from nothing, right?
Yes.
Which goes to show there's a powerful idea. I'm curious to know from your standpoint, what you see in the marketplace today, given all the experience you have, what do you think the number one thing holding most entrepreneurs back right now is?
I think that honestly, it's some of the content that's being created out there. I think that there's a huge push towards automation, and a lot of entrepreneurs are feeling like if they can't get a grasp around social media, around automation, around Facebook ads and email sequences and segmentation, that they just can't start. And frankly, that's not true. I always try to remind people that Facebook started without Facebook. So that definitely means that, there's space for all of us to build potentially billion-dollar businesses doing it the old school way, which is building relationships, putting in that work and that grind, and making sure to deliver a solid product. So, for those entrepreneurs who are struggling to get started, it's get back to basics. It works.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you about this. I mean, so it's interesting. You decided to put your family life on camera, right? So everything from your assistant to your daughters to your hubby, all of them, right? I'm sure that's been an interesting shift. What made you decide to go that far and give the public that much access to you?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with, kind of wanting to put some color behind the black and white of social media. So, there's only so much you can say in just a few characters, and social media isn't a complete picture. People are on there posting least lives, they're showing you laptops balancing on their knees and bank accounts that are struggling, so it's one of those things where if you can actually let a camera into your home from a major cable network, where people can see the ins and outs of balancing a family and running a business, there's nothing more real than that. So I wanted to kind of give it opportunity to show what it's like for the everyday entrepreneur in a very real way.
Well, it's a terrific show. I've enjoyed it. I've caught a few episodes myself, and now I've got to go binge watch all of them. Thank you very much. So, no, I'm loving it. I think it goes to show that there really is no limitation on what you can do with a business or an idea if you really go for it. Now, I know for you, you followed the traditional career path, right? You went to work, you did the college thing, only to find out it had very little meaning and purpose. And I think we've all kind of been there, and some of us may be even there right now. Talk to me a little bit about that, because ultimately it seems like finding actually operating your purpose past the fear is actually what led you to a life you love.
Absolutely. So it's interesting because when I, this was almost 10 years ago now, when I finally jumped into entrepreneurship and aligned better with my purpose, that was the language that I used. I needed to find my purpose. I needed to get to this destination. I needed to realign. And, after the years, now I look at it, having built a multi-million-dollar business and a headquarters with all these employees and another office in California, all these things. I just look at it and I'm like, purpose isn't some destination. It's not some place that we're not really doing anything all along the way until we get there. You know,
Yeah.
it's in the doing daily. And so I look back on it and I see that time through different lens. You know, I realize that the time that I spent in corporate was valuable. And I'm glad that I wasn't, you know, looking at that time begrudgingly, because the tools that I garnered there helped serve my purpose daily. And so the moment did come where I said, where can I use my time best? But at the time I felt like it was, how do I find my purpose? But in reality, it was just a realignment of using my time well to serve others best. And I think that once we make that shift, if you're an entrepreneur who's currently in that space, you'll make your time presently more meaningful, and your leap or your jump or your journey will happen probably a little quicker than you think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and you really did leap.
I did. I was like, are we going to talk about
Most
that?
people were like, yeah,
are we really going to talk about that?
I'll get my side hustle on and I'll figure things out. I'll wait for my side hustle to become my full hustle and then I'll go. No, you're like, no, not am I going to do this. I'm going to do it live while on Periscope. I mean,
because why not? You know, I mean, like, if you're going to cross the bridge, why not burn it to cinders behind you? Yeah, that's what happened. I mean, I'd been building my business on the side. And I always tell people, you know, you might hear about these people who like, I quit my job, I did all this. But a smart person, you know, builds a place for them to go. They make sure that they're going to be a good boss to themselves. And that's exactly what I did. There's never been a day where I haven't paid myself a full and proper salary similar to what I paid in corporate. And I think that's just a really important call out. But yeah, I, you know, been tracking the journey the whole time. People have been following along. And so it just felt honest and an integrity to take them on that part too. So I called up my boss, and in front of 10,000 people, I quit my job.
We're not necessarily recommending you do that. You know, if God tells you to do it, then knock yourself out.
That's right. If you feel that leaning, right? If you feel that inclination, you better oblige him. But just saying, it's not for everybody.
Well, I'm curious, knowing that, you know, as a fellow entrepreneur who has teams of people, you know, I'm constantly trying to work with my team on helping them better understand themselves, their gifts, their talents, all the stuff that I think God put in them as a rule of thumb. I'm curious to know, given that you had that experience with corporate America and you knew that wasn't you, the real you, the authentic you, how has that like positioned you to work with your own teams? How has it like taught you to work with your team?
Sure. So, I mean, I think one of the things is that we regularly, I think everyone on my team has some degree of a side hustle. And frankly, if they're there to serve their talents, I thank them regularly for lending their talents to our organization, because one of the biggest differences in corporate is sometimes I think it feels kind of like they own you in a lot of ways, where you're like, everything has been built and positioned where I can't get out. You know, like, you've got my benefits, you've got, you know, my tenure, I put in this much time, I'm waiting on a pension, and it almost feels like you're trapped, you know, and the reality is you're not. But, you know, because you're never trapped anywhere. But it's just tough, because I never want my people to feel that way on my team, you know, and because it isn't true. And I don't want that to be the ever present. So, you know, they have their own things going on. We always have very open conversation around, what is it that you need? Do you need a more ergonomic chair in order to get more work done? Do you need a more flexible work schedule? We do this thing called flex time during our launches or whenever we're doing major enrollment and onboarding, where, you know, if somebody's working late on one day, then they start late the next day, or they get to, you know, not be in the next day, because I'm not assuming they're this unlimited well for my purpose, you know, and I think that that's something that, where even though we're still a corporation and we still have benefits and 401k and, you know, PTO and all those things, we try to be one with feeling and heart that actually sees the people that work with us. And that's just how I wanted to be treated. So, you know, I feel like a lot of that probably comes from my Christian faith, you know, just as a Christian, like, I align to something more than the dollar. And it's just really important for me that whatever I do is something I can hold to my personal values as being something that I'd be proud of, you know? And so that's a huge part of it. Family is really important to me. And I want to make sure people aren't compromising what matters to them behind a dollar. So we practice that internally and we teach it externally.
No, I love it. You know, it's interesting. I feel like the culture within my organization is directly tied to my faith, right? To treat people how you want to be treated. You know, if you see somebody who needs a hug, give them a hug. Like,
just give them a hug, just do the right thing.
Like,
just do the right thing.
Rocket science.
Totally.
You know, we've gotten this thing within my organization, organizations from time to time, where we'll say, "How you doing?" And if you even see a glimmer of like
anything
uncertainty, it's like, no, how are you really doing?
Yeah, let's talk about it. Absolutely. And I love that because it's that seeing people, you know what I mean? Everybody wants to be seen. And what's great is there's a trickle down. If you are running like that in your company and you're encouraging your people to treat each other that way too, it bleeds into your business as well. So I mean, stuff like that how you doing,
Yeah.
tactic, it works in our customer service. If we find that someone within our courses kind of drops off or disappears and we reach out, we find out what's going on, and we find out someone's like unwell in their family, what's the right thing to do? What would we do if they worked here, if they were a family member, if they were a neighbor? Maybe we'd send them flowers. Maybe we'd organize a meal train. I mean, we try not to run the organization where we look at a problem and walk by it, because that's not how we'd want to be treated. And we're all interconnected as God's children. So let's, treat each other that way. So it worked well, it's worked
Yeah,
well.
for sure. Well, we're not widgets, right? I mean, people aren't
Right.
widgets, and I'm glad you mentioned the kind of the time give back. It's interesting you mentioned that earlier, because at least with my teams, we've done stuff that's been similar where we're like, okay, if you work late, here's a PTO build up or whatever you want to do. I find that just acknowledging the fact that they gave it, they're like, yeah, I don't need any more time off. I just thank you for noticing I'm busting my butt.
Absolutely. And then what's great also is if something does come up, they aren't afraid to communicate. And honestly, when it comes to, anyone who's been married or, run a business, that it comes down to communication. And I think that all these things seem like checkmark tools, like, oh, offer this and do that. But the reality is it just keeps people comfortable to communicate. And that's really what matters. I mean, we've had people on our team who've said, look, I'm going through financial hardship right now, and I can't afford this thing, and it's causing me stress, which is affecting my work. And we're able to say, how can we alleviate that? Whether that looks like helping aid with that expense, or do we need to adjust your pay portfolio, or is there a project you want to tag team on where we can, add some extra revenue? What can we do? Because it doesn't serve anyone if you're in a place where you don't feel good, and we value you. So I love hearing that companies are being run like that. And I encourage everyone to do it because it's your business. Design it the way that you want to show up in the world.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, I got one more question around team members, because so a lot of the folks that I have on the show, many of them are entrepreneurs like us. Many of them are not. And it's funny, entrepreneurs always can recognize another entrepreneur. It's like you can almost see like the stuff.
We're hardwired.
Yeah, right. But one of the things that I've struggled with in years past, that I've been getting better at, and I've watched you do it really well, only because you let people behind the scenes, is dealing with unruly team members. So my man Eddie, I love him to death. I think he is hilarious.
Yes,
he's hilarious. But you manage that relationship with such a grace.
Thank you.
And I'm curious how the heck you have the patience.
Listen, grace upon grace upon grace. We keep talking about my faith, but sometimes I have to really tap into that heavenly peace in order to get by, because I think a lot of it is that when you're a public figure in social media, you're subject to a lot. There's a lot of criticism, there's a lot of opinions, there's a lot of exposure. And the same thing applies when you have a team. There's a lot of responsibility, there's a lot of obligation, there's a lot of personalities. And what I found is that just remembering, one, how would I like to be treated? That's the first thing. Two, you're still running a business. So what expectations are reasonable? Like we can't excuse that things still need to be done. But then the last part, let's do our very best to say it with grace. And extending that grace to others is important because it teaches you how to extend it to yourself, and it teaches them how to also extend it to others, and what I found is that I don't always get it right. I do make mistakes. Some days, if you catch me on the wrong day, I'll say things and I will be snarky or snappy or not my best version, not my best version of myself, and pretending like I'm, perfect in every way that I say things or every way that I approach things, or I don't get angry, is just not realistic. But what I do try to do is circle back and say, look, I'm sorry, that wasn't my best self, and I'm going to try to be better. And then what happens is those days end up not being as often, and again, you're giving someone an opportunity to extend you grace, which, builds a healthy relationship. So it's not easy having lots of personalities, especially personalities, but you do your best to manage them with grace. That's actually the biggest tip.
And guys, if you really want to see this in action, She's the Boss on USA. Go check it out. Make sure you do that for sure. It's hilarious. Give him my best, because he's like walking around with your own private Steve Harvey.
He is a character. Character, that is for sure.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Well, look, in the subject of entrepreneurship, let's talk about the Bootstrap Entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Right. So, because and I'll try to position this a little bit different. So when I started my first business, the audience knows I was homeless at the time. So the audience knows that, but, that's a very bootstrap. So I started out of necessity, right?
Uh-huh.
A lot of other entrepreneurs, start out of, curiosity. So
Sure.
necessity, curiosity. And then others aren't actually starting a business. They're just doing a business based on something they know, which for me kind of leads them down that purposeless trail. In other words, they go and create a business that
Sure.
ultimately becomes a job. How does
Absolutely.
someone start walking their way into discovering what their purpose really is so they can really start to build a legacy out?
I think that a lot of that comes with a willingness to pivot and a willingness to lean into risk.
Mm,
So, like you said before, I mean, I'm similar to you. I started with $24 in my bank account and 3 kids I adopted from the street. So it was a situation where I had to make money because I had to pay these bills, and I also come from a debt-free perspective. So I
sure.
wasn't trying to build something that, I would end up having to owe to someone else later. So all that said, it was bootstrapping, lots of
Mhm.
long nights and all that. But again, that's a willingness to take on risk, because
Yeah.
what if it doesn't work? And what if I've had countless people try to buy my business or offer me investorship. And every time I said no, that is still taking a risk. That's me saying I'm willing to do it with God in his time, than do
Mhm.
it on earthly time and hope that that works,
Yeah,
So
for sure.
it's, I think that honestly is what the shift is from that person who's doing that creatively driven purpose, does sort of, an immediate practical type work
Yeah.
versus saying, I want to do something that feels better, that seems more in alignment. And I think it's biblical, but it says, your provision resides in your purpose.
Yes.
So you're really going to make your most money if you're doing the thing that you're best aligned to do based on your gift and your calling. So
Mhm.
even if you are a great painter, if your true purpose and ability to show up in this world is to teach others to paint, or to develop a new color theory or
Yeah.
concept around painting, then you got to take the risk to lean into that calling. And that's the first step to actually finding the provision and the payment for taking that risk. And yeah, that's the only difference between, I think, people like us who are bootstrapping entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
and people who are entrepreneurs, out of practicality.
Yeah.
It's that they may not feel that same drive or fire or risk-based energy, but you can create that, and it can change everything.
Yeah, it really can. It's interesting. I was telling somebody not too terribly long ago, they were like, well, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I'm a serial entrepreneur. And they're like, a serial entrepreneur. I said, yeah, I have a few, I have a few businesses, a few. Like,
Yeah,
I'm like, well, yeah. And
that's
he's
how
like,
you do it.
how does that work exactly? I said, well,
Right.
I said, in short, my first business, I started out of necessity. I grew it as much as I possibly could, and I still own it. And, we had a team meeting today and everything, and great people, very thankful.
Yep.
God is good for sure.
Yes.
But in doing so, I discovered that my first business was a construction business.
Mhm.
And I discovered that construction business wasn't actually a construction business. It
Mhm.
was a personal development company masquerading as a construction company.
There you go.
You know what I'm saying? And
Mhm.
what I've discovered is this sincere desire to create legacy by creating other entrepreneurs along the way, right?
Yes.
People that, if I look at my life, the reason I am where I am today outside of God is he put people like Steve Myrick and these first mentors that I had that
Mhm.
literally
Mhm.
just poured into me with no expectation of return.
Absolutely. Mhm.
And then I stumbled on this statistic. It was, gosh, I wish I could quote the actual statistic, but they said that the top 1% earners,
Mhm.
of the top 1% earners, there are roughly 72% of them have 8 or more mastery level skills,
Oh, yeah.
but only 30% of them teach them to other people before they pass.
Whew,
So
that is
basically,
heart-wrenching.
yeah. So you
Oh,
think
wow.
about it. I
Don't
mean,
take it with
everything,
you. Oh,
yeah. So think about it. Everything that they've built and they've acquired and they've amassed literally falls away within 2 generations.
oh,
Me-
heartbreaking. Yeah.
Yeah. So meanwhile, you take someone like you who and myself who are I feel like we're legitimately trying to build legacies that outlive us, right?
Mhm.
We're legitimately
Mhm.
trying to say,
Absolutely.
all right, I want to be a 5 talent partner or a
Mhm.
6 talent partner. And for those of you guys who may not share our faith directly,
Yeah.
there's a concept in the Bible that talks about investing what little you have, and those that invest
Mhm.
with the little that they have will be made master over much. Essentially, that's a very
That's
short
right.
synopsis, by the way. I'm curious to know from your perspective, what has been the key point
Mhm.
in early entrepreneurship? Because I know you have a young entrepreneur in your house.
I do.
So what are you teaching her today? What are the do's and don'ts?
So this, without turning into a sermon here, is a biggie for me, So I went to service very early on in entrepreneurship where I was feeling, and I think a lot of people can relate to this, whether or not you're faith-based, like it's a similar feeling that we all feel, and we're all looking for this moment in order to kind of get out of it or move forward. And so I was feeling like the work I'm doing is right, but I'm feeling guilty about it because it almost feels so good and I'm making money and it's working, but am I really serving? Am I really helping? Am I really showing up? How long is this thing going to last? There's a lot of trauma that comes from living in poverty. And there's a lot of trauma that comes from doing without or building on your own or wondering if you have support or building without a map. These things are why you get mentors and support, because you want to limit your trauma-based decision-making by having people around you to support and say, hey, that's not the truth, And for me, a lot of that comes from my faith. And so the number one thing I taught my daughter is that, it's the Bible verse that drives my life, right? It's 1 Peter 4:10. And, because there are lots of different versions. I'm a Message version Christian, which means I barely get it together, versus the King James version.
All day long.
Yeah, no, listen, they're the ones who, God bless them, King James version people are going to have a separate priority line because they understand the these and the thuses and the thous, but the rest of us, ushered through the back. We're the ones with the late service sitting in the balcony. So that said, it says that we are all given, right? Each of us has a God-given gift, and that we're supposed to use those gifts specifically to serve others as the best way to glorify God. Right. Yeah. So even if you're not a believer and that glorify God part doesn't hold much for you, what I think is really powerful about that phrasing and that I teach to my kids and I share with other entrepreneurs, no matter what their faith is that it's almost predetermined that we all have a gift. Our only job is to figure out what it is to land upon. And then we're also told specifically in that second portion of that verse that we're supposed to use it to serve others, So I think a lot of us as entrepreneurs we land on that gift and we may figure out how to use it, but we forget that the whole point of the gift is to serve others. And to put it into like real world application example, it's like if Beyonce only sang in the shower. Do you know what I mean? Like, what are you talking about? You aren't given a voice like that to just sing to yourself. You're given a voice like that to be on stage. And for her to be able to take that voice to as many others as possible, there's financial reward behind that, because you can't get to Italy without a plane, and you can't fly commercial and talk to everybody who loves you and land and still have a voice. So there's a reason she flies private to Germany to get on that stage. These are all real things. So it's it can be difficult for us to understand why we have to build something and use it to serve others. But the reality is it's predetermined. It's how we're hardwired. And that is the answer to that thing that's inside of you wondering why and how do I show up every single day?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about perspective, right? Because, because I love what you just said. And it makes me think about, okay, there was a time in my businesses where it was, okay, I'm doing the work because I need to get paid. So I need to pay the debt.
Sure. Real. It's real.
And some people would argue, and this is where the perspective comes in. They would argue that, well, I only have a product to sell. Like I'm only selling a computer, or in your daughter's case, the hair
wraps. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So how does that change the world? How do I make an impact? I'm curious to how, if you don't mind, reframe that for us. Cause I want people to see how easy it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So, people always get so caught up in the only, in the way they show, but everything is a means to an end. So, my daughter selling her head wrap, she was diagnosed with cancer 2 years ago. It was stage 4. And, these head wraps that she sells, for every head wrap she sells, we donate, a head wrap to, someone who's currently battling cancer. And the same thing with computers. That computer could unlock someone's life, and what you do with the funds that you're using to sell this computer, what are you doing with that? Are you using those funds and investing them in the thing that is going to change the world? There are just so many ways to connect the thing you're doing every single day. And I hesitate to add only or just as a precursor to anything that I do with my time. If I am just taking my kid to school for carpool, that moment and that conversation in that car about business or entrepreneurship or whatever could be the thing that changes her life, and it was me just taking her to carpool, so it's really important for us to realize that in every moment there can be value, and in every task there can be value. Be the best computer salesman ever, because that very story could be the thing that helps leverage your career, so I try not to get caught up in that thinking, because it's so damaging and it really doesn't serve.
Yeah, well, but I think that's the difference. One of the things I've been trying to, and that people are watching in this, listening to this world, whether
Yeah.
it's going to be real time or well, that's a recorded, but you know what I mean. They're going to be
Yeah.
watching this, right? One of the things that I've been trying to circle the plane around, so to speak, is this concept of legacy, right?
Hmm.
And as I'm circling the plane around, it's like, okay, I got a product, I got a service. Okay, well, the
Yes.
product or service just serves the customer. No, it serves the customer. It may bring them more confidence. It may bring them
That's
more
right.
joy, happiness.
Right.
It may allow you to have charitable contributions to other
Mhm.
organizations, over the 501(c)(3)s and stuff like that. I just want people to maybe take a notepad and a pen and look at their business with a different set of eyes and say,
Yes.
how can my business, my product, my service, my time, my talent, my resource, how can I see it differently? And I
Mhm.
would I would go ahead and argue from God's eyes, right?
Yes.
In what way can I position this to create a lasting legacy that ultimately lives out us, right?
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
is that something that you do every time you get ready to launch a new product or service yourself?
Oh, it's not just that, it's built into the hard wiring and makeup of our business. We
Mhm.
consider ourselves not just, we don't refer to our clients as just clients or legacy builders,
Yeah.
because we want to always keep in a perspective that they may think they're only selling hair cream or whatever else, but
Mhm.
what we do in our company is we pay school fees. You know what I mean? We help
Yeah.
people get mortgages, we help get people out of debt, we help inspire hope, and we might be doing that through a product, but
Yeah.
ultimately that product is serving a greater picture, because if they're able to pay that, college tuition, that could be college tuition for the kid who's in medical school who cures cancer. And thank God we were able to play our tiny, tiny role in helping make that bigger picture happen. So, and then on a personal level, legacy is where I am right now. So, for my company, I just recently hired a CEO so that I could step back and take on a chairman role, so that this way
Yeah.
I could specifically focus less on the day to day, but more on the greater vision. How are we showing up philanthropically? Where are we looking to support organizations? My preferred organization is City of Refuge in
Mhm.
Atlanta, Georgia. They're a Christian-based organization that offers 360 support around women and children who are survivors of sex trafficking and homelessness. And so I work with them, and we're integrating that entire organization to our succession plan. How can we make sure our business forever and all time will help support this organization forever and all time?
Yeah.
And these are the legacy driven actions that can only happen if I started off selling my one product and my
Mhm.
one program to one person. So,
Yeah.
for me to get here today where I'm able to donate multiple figures to organizations is because I started off selling one product for $11 to
Yeah.
one person.
Yeah.
So legacy matters, and it starts with a dollar.
Well, and another, I think, reoccurring theme that keeps coming up too is this: despise not small beginnings, right?
Yes, do
We
not.
we
Yes.
all we want to do is we want to get to the top of the mountain. And
Mhm.
I was talking to somebody not long ago, and they were like, and this guy comes up to a young kid and says, "Well, when I make it," I'm like, "What does make it mean?"
What does that even mean? What is the number?
Yeah, and he's like, "Well, I'm like, well, when you can describe what make it means, now we're starting to paint a picture of a vision. Right now, you don't have
That's
that
right. That's
kind of
right. Yeah.
scenario. So how would we encourage an entrepreneur right now that maybe is in the early stages? For example, maybe they've got an early stage business. They're in their purpose. In other words,
Mhm.
they're getting meaning and significance. They can see how it creates legacy, but maybe they're not getting the return on revenue right now that they're hoping for, and really need to even make it self-sustaining.
Yeah.
Or they got a brand spanking new idea and they're
Yeah.
trying to get it to fruition, but they're scared to death that they don't have the resources and time and talent to bring it to fruition. How do we coach them?
So one of the first things I always tell people is something that I had to believe and has proven true when I only had $24 in the bank account and no money to start this business, is that no one can outwork me. Now, I'm not
Mm,
encouraging burnout, and I'm not encouraging, not having balance, but what I am saying is that work ethic is free, it is
yeah.
abundant, and people don't use it, and so it is my biggest differentiator. So you can put me next to the other guy who grew up in a home with all the privilege and all the money and all the cash and all the tools, and if he's not willing to show up the way I'll show up, I'll beat him every single time,
Yeah.
and that is something that we always talk about and champion in our company, that no one will ever beat us on customer service. People pick Chick-fil-A and their super long lines because of their
Mhm.
service, knowing that because the machine at McDonald's, the ice cream machine is going to be broken, you know what I mean? And half the
Yeah.
menu items will be gone,
Yeah.
and it's not that the line isn't It's not that the product may taste any better. It's not that, they can't get food. It's that we're willing to deal with so many other things because we know that the service is going to be better, and you control that, and it's free and abundant. So I always tell every new entrepreneur who feels like they're not seeing the traction, or they don't have enough, or they want to stand out more, the market is saturated, all the excuses that come to mind, just remember that work ethic and customer service are abundant. And if you can deliver that consistently, you will beat out and outlast every other competitor.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, so let's talk about competitors just for a second.
Sure.
Are competitors something you pay attention to, or something you completely ignore?
I don't even know what those are. I just use that term as in like in response to other people saying I have competitors. I don't have them. Like I literally, it's funny because people always say like, well, who are your favorite people to follow? And I have people I admire and respect. I have peers in this space, but ultimately, I don't really have competitors, because what I've been called to do is uniquely my mission. And it belongs to me solely, and what God has for me is solely mine, and everything that belongs to me will arrive to me. So I'm not really worried about anybody else, and I don't spend any time consuming. I spend more time creating. And then more than anything, I try to remember that life and business are dynamic. If you had asked me when I was younger if I was going to have, like, what would I do in the future? I wouldn't have said, oh, have a podcast, have a reality TV show, and a business with a huge digital presence. I couldn't say it because it didn't exist. Yeah. So I've learned to stop limiting myself to thinking I can only do what I see other people do, and start limiting and allowing myself to hopefully see myself as close to how God sees me, which is limitless, and to whatever destination he wants to take me. So that means I can't spend time looking left and looking right. I gotta look ahead.
I love it. I love it. Well, I want to chit chat with you about, you got some exciting projects coming up. Yes. You were very kind to share that with me before we technically hit the air. And I know it's a little early. I can't help myself.
Yeah, it's
technical. But I think the audience will be super stoked.
This is exclusive.
Yeah, this really is an exclusive. Talk to us about what's coming down next in the pipeline.
Yeah, so I'm really fortunate to have inked a over 7-figure deal with Simon & Schuster to write my first book. So I'm really, really excited about that. I guess the business lesson in it all for the entrepreneurs listening is that a lot of us, again, do what we think we have to do in terms of the rinse and repeat routine, or what we see our peers doing. And that would have naturally meant writing a business book, right? Like how to succeed in your own way, or, 10 steps to such and such. And I'm not going to lie, that's where I started. I said, this is the next chapter, write a book. It's part of the business, part of the brand. It makes sense. And everyone was open to it. Publishers were just waiting to see what I would offer. And it took me 7 months and to put together this proposal. And when it was done, it wasn't right. I ripped it up. I started over, and I took the risk. I wrote what needed to be written, which is my memoir. It's how did I get here, and what was it like sleeping on a couch till I was 12, and what was it like picking up 3 girls from the streets of Baltimore and taking them into my home to raise them at the same time that I quit my 6-figure job and launched a business, and how did I get a TV show, and what does it feel like being exposed like that, and being married, to someone who is interfaith, interrace, and has a whole host of his own life things, that I'm coupling with trying to build a business. And writing all that out and being honest about it, while also explaining how I'm chasing the American dream as a child of immigrants, but with values, and, not wanting to get caught up in this world. I want to be in it, but not of it, and then submitting it, knowing it wasn't what anyone asked for. And then in the biggest way, having 26 publishers show up, in a bidding war, and one publisher offering over 7 figures for me to take the conversation off the table, and knowing that I sat on a proposal for 7 months in fear that this wasn't going to be what people wanted. And, and now I'm writing it, and the book will be available for order in, middle of 2022. And I'm excited for people to read it. And I'm excited to see the impact it makes. And again, legacy wise, this book will go places that I never could before. It goes places where you don't need a phone to charge up. And that's the real blessing. Hopefully it'll reach minds and change hearts.
Well, I know, and I don't think it will. I know it will. And I know it will because it's not the book that you wanted to write. It's the book that needed to be read.
Really hoping that it makes the impact that it needs to make. I feel confident, but also what I know is that I did the right thing in writing this book, and I'm doing the right thing in putting this messaging out here. And some people are going to love it. Some people are going to be like, didn't expect this, and no matter what, it's honest, it's in truth, and it's aligned with my calling. So Thank you for your support. I'm excited about it.
Sure, absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
and right during the actual launch phase, you have to come back on and talk.
Oh, definitely. I have to come back, and then we've got to like give away some books or something like that, you know,
Yeah,
so
for sure.
people can get a hold of them.
Well, let me ask you this: who is the person that needs to read it? If you had to pick someone, what is going on inside of their heart and their mind and their soul? Who is that person?
So to tell you the truth, I'm writing the book with my daughters in mind, you know, and that doesn't mean that the book is meant for young girls. It's the person who's been put into circumstances that may not have been what they decided for themselves, you know, but still they're responsible to get them out of it. So, you know, when you've had trauma or tragedy or struggles, or you've just sort of ended up in life because society told you this is where you have to go, and you have the blessing of being awakened to this doesn't feel right, but what's next, you know, and how do I get out of it? And what are the big changes that I have to do? This is that book to say, look, you're not alone. It will be terrible. You will still survive it. And you're going to meet problems every single day, but you also have the power to solve them. So this is that book. And I can't wait to get these tools out there because they're true and they're real. And it's a message that people aren't talking about.
It's going to be amazing. I know it will be. I know it will be.
Thank
you.
Listen,
final one thing. If you had one thing left to share with somebody about purpose, what would it be?
I think it'll hark back to a little bit of what we talked about in the early conversation. It's that every day you are living in your purpose if you're showing up with intentionality. Purpose isn't a destination, it's in the daily doing. So make sure that you're intentionally doing something every single day to push towards your legacy, because that ultimately is enough.
I love it. I love it. Nicole, thank you so much for coming on Stuck, Though Unstoppable. I really appreciate you.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Can't wait to do it again. Talk to you soon.
See you soon.
All right. If you love that interview, go ahead and check out this next one right here.
You know, my good friend John Ruland says this all the time. You do not have to have millions of followers to make millions of dollars. And I would say, and millions of dollars nor millions of followers make you influential or successful.